Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Hello, welcome to everyone, wherever you're joining us from. Looking forward to interesting discussion on leveraging AI and tech to deliver business value. So I'm Oliver Lennon. I'm Chief Executive Officer here at Syndeo, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. Just before we start, a couple of logistics and housekeeping. It is a discussion. We will run 45 minutes at the very maximum, conscious of everyone's time. We do want you to engage from an audience perspective, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have set aside some time towards the end of the session where we'll pick up and we get the panel to pick up on those questions that you want to feed through as we go through the session. Before we start, just a quick overview of Syndeo and who we are. So we have a conversational AI platform that takes, I guess, a lot of the heavy lifting out of leveraging AI for customer engagement, particularly over digital channels. So think about engaging over WhatsApp, WeChat, Viber, Messenger, etc., web chat. We also have a consulting side of the business, and that's focusing on helping some global brands working through their digital transformation journey. So our team with our associates have assisted right through from strategy formulation through to implementing voice and digital-based AI solution. So today we're going to be discussing, I guess, conversational AI to power customer journey right through from acquisition to the servicing of that customer through the life cycle of the customer. Sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but I've got a great team here with me today that are going to make a lot of sense of that for you. So I'm delighted to have Kevin Myers, who's Chief Product and Marketing Officer. Kevin can correct me here as I go, of AI Advertising. Kevin leads the company's development of the campaign performance platform. I guess the platform job is to analyze a robust mix of audience data to help businesses find, who to talk to, what to say to them, and how to market to them. And we'll pick a little bit of that up as we go through the session. Also delighted to have, I'm going to call him an industry veteran, even though his profile pic makes him look a lot younger. Curtis Roll is joining us today. Curtis has been in the industry for over 26 years, I think, Curtis, delivering transformational projects for leading brands, the likes of American Express, Equifax, IHG, and I'll not list them all, Curtis, but really has been focused on the customer journey orchestration, covering, CX design, conversational AI, and the end-to-end transformation. Last but not least, joining me is my fellow co-founder, Mr. Alan Beck, who is also the CTO here at Syndeo. So Alan has a wealth of knowledge of conversational AI, has worked with a lot of enterprise solutions, again, with big organizations globally, the likes of United States Postal Service, Voya, more recently in terms of a project with Glorify. So a wealth of knowledge of implementing AI systems, and has also built our own, the Syndeo conversational AI platform. So we've got a huge amount of coverage, both from the front end customer perspective, but also allows us to deep dive, time permitting, a little bit into the technology side of things. But before I start, I thought I'd just set the scene with a little video I came across a few weeks ago, which will probably remind some of us who have been in this industry of the vagaries of using AI, or certainly speech recognition technology. So I'll let this play for a few seconds.
Janice. Janice. Smoothie.
Smoothie.
Calendar.
No meetings today. Remember, dentist at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open. And we're going to do one more.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open. Open door.
Repeat that.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey, open door.
Play on the floor.
Stop it there. You get the gist of going to the dentist isn't bad enough. Certainly trying to get home and get into your house with a fat mouth is equally as difficult. But I suppose let's get into the meat of the discussion. I seen something recently, a couple of weeks back, from Gartner. Dan O'Connell, and I engaged with Dan, produced some material indicating that by 2026, I think it is, that conversational AI is going to drive labor cost savings of 80 billion. Right? 80 billion is a huge figure. Curtis, I'll bring you in here because I'm sure you remember back to the likes of the late 90s when I remember attending Speech Tech in Times Square, Marriott, New York, when speech recognition technology was going to revolutionize the industry. We're 20 years on, and I'm not entirely sure that has totally revolutionized. I mean, what do you think about certainly what Gartner's saying, and where do you see, the savings?
Well, thanks for including me today. So I'm old enough to know when we were selling IVR as a standalone best of breed, and we had natural language and text to speech. We were looking at just focusing on containment at that point. There's still companies today that are focusing on that, but recently we've looked at the likes of omni-channel, so any entry point, any conversation across the enterprise would be seamless and consistent. And now with the advent of bots and the combination of digital channels and cloud-based contact centers, we're seeing a refocus on that. So everybody was trying to get as much containment as possible to the detriment of their relationships and their ability to close deals. So now you're seeing a big focus on containment with context, so that when it turns into assisted service, the AI continues to help the agents with the conversation and the right data at the right time. So we're also seeing a lot of calls that start in a voice channel that end up in a multi-channel, web to mobile, mobile to web, and it's interesting to watch. So one of the things that we'll talk about later is, while I had the 18 years at Genesis and almost 2 years at Microsoft Nuance, we would come at it with the front door is everything without understanding what that engagement was from an outbound perspective or an assisted service perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about what we just did together at a fintech startup where we had a blank slate. We didn't have to replicate any of the bad habits of the past, and we did less is more agile with a bot AI focus, and it turned out to be fantastic. So we can unpack that a bit. But I think, one of the things that we're also seeing is when you're designing a strategy, don't do it in a silo. Don't do it in a tech or a contact center operations. Bring in your product people, bring in your marketing people, bring in your data people and your integration people so they understand what the goal is, so that they don't build things that are hard to undo or hard to overcome later. So it has come a long way, and I think people are moving away from let's contain everything to let's have that conversation across any channel that would enhance the conversation.
Yeah, certainly omni-channel, multi-channel has been pervasive for a while. It's interesting just to see, will we actually get to that 80 billion in 2026? I'm not entirely sure, but it also depends, I think, on the back end, and in terms of a concept called transactional AI. So front end, absolutely, but tying up the back end equally is important. Alan, I'll bring you in here just to give us the 10,000 feet elevator pitch on conversational AI, because again, if you read, everybody has a different opinion on what, just give me an overview of the tech at a high level without too many ones and zeros, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm recovering from a sore throat, so if I have to mute the cough, you'll excuse me. So conversational AI, artificial intelligence, very broad term, marketing centric, refers to the computer science domain of machine learning. And again, even very broad area, and even broad within the domain of conversational AI. So we have the audio, which is speech to text, we have text to speech, and then we have the understanding of what the user has said. And I'm going to focus on that just because the other areas are so broad. That would be a separate conversation. Within the understanding of the text, we have NLP and NLU, natural language processing, which I tend to think of as more algorithmic, and NLU, which is the statistical models that help us get useful information from user input. We tend to refer to intents and entities, or NER, named entity recognition, to gather what the user has said, what they wanted, which is the intent, and any useful parts of the sentence, which is the entity. So I want to check my balance with account ABC. Intent is check balance. The entity obviously is ABC, so that's pretty simple. We can also bring in sentiment analysis and emotion analysis. They also tend to be classification problems. Sentiment is much more pervasive or common, which tends to be just negative, neutral, or positive sentiment. Emotion can be used too, tends to come off the emotions of Plutchik's wheel, but scaled down to increase accuracy. I think around 6 emotions tends to be where the line is there. There's also some other interesting tech like NLG, which is natural language generation, which is really cool, and impressive tech, but it's not quite ready for showtime in a deployment perspective, because obviously you can't, it's difficult to control what it will generate, but it's definitely something to look at in the future. So
yeah, I mean, I know we've been involved in a number of those systems, and with Curtis as well over the last couple of years. I mean, we'll pick up on some of those details, I guess, but things like the data and the training, excuse me, if got right, regardless of whether it's digital or voice, absolutely can drive, a lot of efficiencies. Kevin, conscious you're coming at this from probably a slightly different but still related element in terms of the, let's call it the front end, the customer acquisition piece. So, I mean, how do you see the conversational AI or indeed AI playing into that in terms of what you're doing at AI advertising?
Well, Oliver, thank you first for having me. I wonder, is that Robo Alan or is that real Alan? Because in practice sessions, his sore throat. I thought he was going to put his own robot conversation in here.
Well, he's the CPO, so he has also a ponytail, I believe. But unless he's got a cut, there you are.
That made it real. That made it real.
It's a man bun. It's not a ponytail. It's a man bun.
Well, look at that. That's the part of. I guess I play the role of also being the marketer and the engineer in this, and it's all about storytelling and conversations that happen when calls come in, when requests come in. Hopefully start with the conversations that formerly were done by too few. The critical ones on what is my brand? What is my message? What do we believe as a company? And those are the conversations that we believe AI can push forward into, so that the things that we're telling about our products, our services, our brand will be at the fingertips and the lips of people across the enterprise. Oliver, from our standpoint, we look at AI now from a advertising and marketing standpoint, and look over our shoulder at, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't know what SaaS was, software as a service. And then mobile was going to change the world, that everything had to be mobile first, when in fact, those were just enablers. And everything Alan just reviewed on natural language processing and generation. By the way, Alan, the generation part is really magnificent. Some of my peers have been posting blogs, and you can't tell that they're written by machines.
Oh yeah,
so
it's crazy.
It's really come a long way, and so has voice. But in our sense, we go ahead and tap into those models and linear regression and cluster analysis, so that we can get to behaviors. Everything about what we are bringing to the market is focused on the data you have in your CRM and personifying it, and finding out what is it that your customers and prospects believe, care about, desire. And you can harness that now, but you can harness it conversationally across the entire organization. And one last point, Oliver, is that where all the money is spent in enterprises is in advertising often. And so you want to get that savings in 80 billion, go ahead and attack to figure out what's working and what's not in your advertising, and you can recoup a lot of those dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I think that figure from looking through Dan's data was ostensibly created from the customer service element alone. So as you say, if you start to add on your marketing dollars and the savings in terms of obviously not only the human effort required to identify those prospects, but then the rate at which you can engage them with pertinent and relevant information is key. I guess a lot of what you're doing is also building up their personas as well, Kevin, within, or associated with the CRMs.
Yeah, that's what we do, is start with the core systems, often CRM, could be marketing, could be ERP or general ledger, where you house your customer data. When's the last time you heard anybody say, I love my CRM and it's working perfectly? It is a magnificent system, but yet we really have to build upon it. And so that's what we do, is we go ahead and take all of those signals of the people within your database, and then look towards third-party data, first-party data, and marry it up to what we can learn behaviorally about those people. We append the personas back to the CRM so that the rest of the enterprise can learn that whether or not they're talking to factual Francis, just keep it to the facts, or motivated Mike, that other things they're interested in, that the rest of the enterprise can support that. There is, in my world, in advertising, there's this over 100-year-old statement that said, half of my marketing and advertising works, I just don't know what half. We believe that AI, machine learning, can figure this out. It can eliminate that waste. It can prove what works, what doesn't, and what's next. And it can drive it, Oliver, through the enterprise to the customer engagement platforms that you all are excellent at building.
And just a point, Oliver, let me make a point for Kevin. So when Kevin and I started working together, Kevin was a vendor of mine at the fintech startup. And a couple points, I know there's people on the call that run operations, that run transformations, et cetera. It's very key to have the CMO understand exactly what you can do to augment the messaging and the acquisition strategies, because they put the nets out, they build the personas, but when those orchestrated conversations come back in where relationships are being built, where you sell, you service, and you do different things, it has to be very cohesive. So CMOs traditionally have an idea of how to do that, but don't have a very, basic knowledge of how the machine works underneath. If you can couple those together, it becomes very weaponized and very valuable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that either in the Q&A or the real world example.
Yeah, just on the Q&A, I'll remind people, please, see some questions coming through already. Just keep firing your questions through. But certainly picking up, as Curtis, we've been in the industry long enough to see that everything has been very siloed. People in the contact center world, once you mention digital, it tends to move into a dark marketing domain, and that's completely separated. So I think you'll see much more joined up approach going forward, particularly, what Kevin's talking about with the whole customer experience and through that life cycle. Alan, if I drop you back in here, just picking up on what Kevin has said, vis-a-vis that persona. I mean, from a conversational perspective, when reaching out to customers, how would you see, conversational AI starting to play in that space as well?
Well, I think if you're talking about outbound reach, it's probably underutilized. So, the main example that comes to mind is whenever I'm off the phone with any given contact center, often I'll get an SMS text, probably score 1 to 4, score 1 to 10. So, it's a very obvious case that seems ready to be, expanded into. So does it have to be SMS? What other channels does the organization support from an omni-channel perspective? And there are going to be limitations or restrictions around the other channels. So, have they messaged you before? Are they registered with you, etc.? But they're definitely underutilized, I think. With regards to the actual, the content of the message and the responses, I kind of feel at this point there's no reason why we can't support whether it's intent analysis of the response, or sentiment or emotion analysis, which is probably more pertinent to an after contact center call.
Pick up sarcasm by any chance?
Yeah, sarcasm's definitely a challenging one.
I was going to say, not that our colleagues in the US maybe get sarcasm too much, but
yeah, well, there are some techniques that can be used, but it's definitely not foolproof. For example, sharp changes in the sentiment of the conversation, but it'll depend on the input and things like that. But intent mining is another one that could be very useful for those kind of outreach scenarios. So there's definitely a lot to be done, and a lot I think is not being utilized there for sure. I
guess we've covered what I would call maybe the theoretical, what could happen, and I guess what should we do, or what should organizations do. Curtis, again, you've been around, you've seen some of these projects, you've seen some of them go wrong, perhaps not as badly wrong as that video I played at the outset. Again, give me some, let's say the warts and all of projects, and your view on what has worked and what hasn't worked. And I know we're still at the very early stage of a lot of this technology being utilized, certainly within an enterprise, and we'll maybe come on to that as well. That's maybe not utilized near as much as it should be, but from your view, from that more practical approach to getting these projects up and running.
Well, I mean, I think historically, coming from the days where I was carrying a bag at Genesis, where we had a solution for everything, we would always try to put that in, and through professional services, customize as much as we could, sometimes coming up with suboptimal results. Same thing into the nuanced transition. But when we had the opportunity at the Greenfield, we had the ability to pick, I mean, I know this goes way back, but we had the ability to pick best of breed. We normalized the data, so it really didn't matter if we had conversational AI up front, talking to a Genesis cloud platform integrated with Microsoft Dynamics. We could have pulled the Genesis platform out and done Nice in Contact or Five9 or Talkdesk. So we actually built it in a modular fashion, but we own the experience up top. And through the APIs and the data flows, we manage that orchestration so that if one particular vendor didn't perform well, we could bop them out at the end of the year and put somebody else in. So I think we're going to see a reemergence of that. And we're also going to see the marketing shops with the digital, what I want to call lab groups that are doing their own thing. They're now realizing that that orchestrated conversation has a lot to do with how we handle it within the automated channels as well as the assisted channels. So I think for the first time, we're seeing them come back on, we couldn't pull off what we thought we could. Now we need to collaborate. So in some of the big brands I'm working with now, who may have a couple hundred bots deployed and have great, NLU programs, they're coming back to say, let's all work together because it's too hard the way we've been doing it separately.
Yeah, Alan, I mean, you've seen the inside of some of those projects too more recently, from that, I guess, for the audience, the practical side of things. So again, the theory, we all understand that around NLU and, how valuable it can be, whether it drives 80 billion or whatever is not the point. But I mean, what are you seeing? And, from a practical perspective, how have you seen getting some of these projects working? And perhaps maybe what have you seen going horribly wrong?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think, a lot of the vendors out there, they'll allow you to get things going quite quickly, but you getting something going and feeling that it's working versus a deployed system at scale are reasonably, very drastically different. And it reminds me of the programming saying, which is modification from a different saying, but it's that 90% of the work is 90% of the delivery, and the remaining 10% of the work is the other 90% of the delivery. So that's a semi-amusing way of saying that,
Developers are often wrong in their estimation. Is that what it means?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on my own estimates, to be honest, but basically to get it kind of where you feel it's good compared to where it needs to be good is drastically different. And again, what I feel some of these vendors lack, I don't believe that there's the appropriate level of tooling in order to help the customer understand the data that they have, understand the limitations of it. I mean, they said data in AI is everything, but it's not, it's nearly everything. It's like, well, what's the algorithm? Different algorithms converge at different rates and converge to different levels, which means they're more susceptible to accuracy depending on the type of data and the level of data. So how much data does the customer have? And is it the right algorithm? And making sense of that and taking it from test to deployment, but then when it's deployed, well, then how do you better it? How do you make sure it's better without ruining the experience that's already there? And so you can get something live and you kind of feel like it has potential, but it hasn't reached it. And you can say, yeah, it has, it will have amazing CX someday, but without the tooling and knowledge of the holistic view around it, that someday will always be tomorrow. It'll never be today.
I mean, I
So-
think, picking up on the point Curtis made earlier around the greenfield stuff that we were working on. I mean, it was pluses and minuses there. Obviously, the lack of data is a big drawback. And I know we spent a lot of time working with the business to try and understand what that data might look like. So that there's downsides of the greenfield, but certainly, if you're looking at a brownfield, you do have lots of data, but is it the right data? Are you actually training with bias in certain ways as well? So.
And that's why I mentioned the algorithms, because a lot of people will say, we'll throw more data at it, but more data will not necessarily make it better, depending on the type of data, the bias in the data, is the data skewed? Again, the convergence rates and stuff, there's a lot to it. And a lot of the platforms out there don't offer the ability or the insights or the tooling to get you to where you need to be. And I kind of, it's enough to excite you, but not enough to deliver in many cases, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, there's some of the stuff that Dan O'Connell mentioned and his Gartner side of thing, that tooling and that, the big vendors are doing quite a lot of the NLU space. But again, I'm conscious we're probably going down a little bit of a rabbit hole and get a little bit over technical. Kevin, bring you back in. You mentioned, I know we had a discussion a while ago about personas and, this concept of constantly refining the persona as the interaction happens over the lifetime of the customer. Tell me a little bit about that and why that's kind of valuable, or why you see it from a marketeer's perspective as highly valuable.
Yeah. Peter Drucker famously quoted, "The purpose of a business is to create a customer." Curtis Roll reminds me of, but you got to keep them. So this idea of creating and keeping is a really interesting theme, because the worst kind of marketing and advertising in the customer journey is where marketing makes a promise. And then you come into the enterprise and we don't know what that promise was. Was it kept? So tagging the individual as they come in as best you can as to what are their needs, wants, desires, what is their personality, their triggers, and making sure that as you go down the conveyor or the assembly line to the rest of the organization, through sales, through customer support, through technology, that those elements are captured and kept, is what I look at as a holistic customer journey. And Curtis, you made the point, it's like, make sure that everybody's at the table, right? Because if we're not figuring this out cohesively, then the tech is going to fail.
Well, and something to throw in there, Kevin, with your personification of prospects and customers, the spectrum is wide. There are people that don't want any BS. They want their data timely via an SMS. When they want to ask a question to a bot, they want a quick answer. They don't want a long conversation. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that really want to talk and want to make sure that they feel good about whatever it is they're doing, whether it's a transaction or financial advice or anything. And in your personas, you can basically lay out what to expect. And that's a little bit different than the way a lot of people are architecting their front doors and their mobile and web strategies, which is, we're going to get everybody to download an app and everyone's going to be comfortable doing that. Well, that's not true. You know that. And if you bury the phone number way behind, then they may go somewhere else if they're prospecting you against somebody else. So it is a careful, coordinated balance that we learn together.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to go to your airline provider and talk to somebody about your points? Good luck.
Well, especially with the audience there, British Airways is the best example of not being able to get to anybody, and their bots.
Are Delta any better?
Yeah. No.
I don't think so. You're right. I think it spans both sides of the pond, I'm conscious we're on the half hour at the moment, and just remind any questions. I see some flowing through already, so keep them going. That there's a rather long one here I'm going to attempt to read out when I get to them, but a couple of things before we sort of move into the Q&A piece from the audience. I guess if you're to summarize, maybe Curtis will bring you in, your top three do's and don'ts, if you will, from, again, your own experience of what works or what doesn't work
Well, just one call out. I wanted to go back before I get to the three.
Sure.
So when we talk about clean data, we're being, I guess, acclimated into pick a CRM provider, whether it's Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Google's offer, or Oracle's offer, and go that route where you're beholden to them for structure and cleanliness and access. I like the idea of creating a dataverse that is your system of record, letting CRM read off of that, but you go to a pure source that you're able to manage for just enough data to have that initial conversation. And when you go in deep, then you go back and you look at all that structured data. But I think that the three things that I learned being on the other side of the table were you've got to involve all of your subgroups in the planning and goal setting, because I think some don't understand and some have a different way to do things that will make your life harder later on, as opposed to including them up front. I think having the product management and the marketing people in there is also key, because they don't understand the capabilities that we have in our bag of tricks. So, I mean, I would say that's probably it. And make sure that you are efficient with your use of partners, and don't assume that a one vendor solution is going to work for you in this day and age.
Yeah, true. I mean, most of those vendor solutions, while they do interoperate, I mean, you certainly, again, the experience that we've seen in recent times, you don't want to get trapped into one and then have a lift and shift if you need to move to another one with slightly better NLU or slightly better processing. So I think keeping that, you mentioned your data lake or your data layer is, I think how we've seen it implemented is important. Kevin, your top tips, if you will, or your 2 or 3 sort of takeaways for the audience in terms of do or don't, or maybe they're all do's, maybe you're hyper positive on it.
I'll tag off of what Curtis said with maybe some different descriptions. I grew up in the CRM industry a couple decades ago, and back then the word that was thrown around was, let's get to the golden record, a single view of Curtis and Oliver and Alan and Kevin. And presently, that journey is called getting to zero-party data. And what that means is not third-party data, not first-party data of who, my address, my email, what I buy from you, but rather I'm telling you something about myself. Where in your CRM file do you have a field for how's Kevin feeling? What does he need, want, desire? That's the journey. So the journey begins with this older term, the golden record, Curtis hosted in the Dataverse, but really the journey is getting to that zero-party data. So I would make those your do's, from those 3 levels. What you don't want to do is leave anybody out in that journey. I think we've talked about it. Marketing, sales leadership, support, finance, operations. How do they all feel about, what they need to learn about the customer? And then I would just say to anybody who's shopping, it is the system implementers of the world who I think bring this unbiased point of view where they focus on the people and the processes you want, and then worry about the tech. I mean, AI and ML is just math, and there's smart people that can apply it. But I think you need to focus on the people and the process, and the Syndeos of the world, live to do that.
Yep, I think probably most of our audience would agree there. Alan, again, conscious time's marching on us. Again, give us your key takeaways for the audience in terms of.
Don't ramble, is that what you mean?
Sorry?
Don't ramble, is that what you mean?
Don't ramble, but just math. I'm sure you can give it quite.
Just math. Well, Kevin mentioned earlier, about this holistic view of the journey. I would say whenever you are at implementation and you're looking at the tech, you need to be holistic as well. So again, you need to not only look at how easy is it to get something going, but ensuring that you can maintain it, scale it, and take it forward. So you need to look at the holistic tech stack from getting it live and what happens once it's live. How do you make it better? Machine learning isn't a silver bullet. So it's a tool among the wider CX strategy. So don't just see it as a silver bullet, I suppose. And yes, do do ask, this one's just I've thought of, do ask your vendor whenever you're struggling with accuracy or some part of the system, especially within conversational AI, ask whoever your vendor or service provider is how they are, if they're going to help you, how they're going to, achieve that. Because if they're going away and achieving it and they're not using the tooling that they offer you, well, then I think that says quite a lot about, whether the tooling is powerful enough to deliver what you need it to deliver. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Oliver or Alan, just one point to add there. The approach we took, which was to own the experience up top, decoupled from the underlying platforms we were publishing to, is very important because agility and being able to tweak things without have to worry about 3 or 4 different system impacts was a good design and something that everybody should take advantage of if you're transforming.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. I'm going to flip in because we have a number of questions here. Some of them are quite long, so I'll probably try to read through them quickly. So one from Dave: how important is real-time feedback and data on chatbot performance, and how do you make best use of it? Who is the key audience? ? Tech, product, operations. Curtis, do you want to have a stab at answering that if you're able to understand my...
Yeah, I mean, from a is something broken and do we need to act on it? I see a lot of that with Qualtrics and Medallia being integrated into the solution. So if someone says, hey, your chatbot is low accuracy or I'm not getting what I need from the self-service, being able to get that to a conversation and also log it for you guys on the back end to make changes. So a reporting intake and an act on if it was a bad experience, we're seeing, big strategies get put into play for that.
And who, I suppose the follow-on question on that, Kevin, I'll bring you in a second then, is who is the audience for that feedback? Is it the tech team, the operations, the product team? Who are you normally seeing as the team within the organization taking ownership, I guess, of that feedback?
Well, I think if that question is to me, it's twofold. It's the QA and customer sentiment team. Some have teams, some people have them in the contact center operations group. And then it's the folks that are doing the app dev on the mobile device and some of the web properties and maybe some of the NLU scripts. So it's a combination of tech and experience teams.
Okay. Sorry, Kevin, I'll bring you in there.
There's a category within the CRM sphere, if you will, called reputation management. So it's also a place where people are online saying things about you. And you have to be able to listen for those online signals. So customer service brings in, as Curtis is describing, feedback. Sometimes that's a nice way of saying it. Jay Baer's an author and he writes a book, Hug Your Haters. You can get some valuable feedback and flip a customer for life if you treat them the right way, whether or not it's what they're saying online or saying to a human being. That's got to be funneled back in, and generally speaking, that is through those departments. I mean, it's customer service, it's sales, it's operations, but let's make sure we get the marketers to the table to say, how do we respond? What do we say? So I think it's a really great question, and the answer is not simple. It's not just one department or one person.
And I sorry, Oliver, I'm going to jump in before you go on. I'm going to say something technical, if that's okay. I'm going to actually refer to what I said earlier, which is depending on the algorithm, throwing more data at it will not necessarily make it better. In fact, it might give you a false sense of security because a lot of the algorithm types, if we're talking about text and recognition, will give you 100% recognition for the new thing you trained, but you will bias it in unintended ways, and without the ability through, again, the tooling, you've no way of knowing, and you just keep making it worse, or possibly just making it continued pace of mediocrity.
Perfect. And I'm not going to delve into that anymore because we have another few in here. I'll try to get through at least one more, which is quite a long one, come in early on. I'll try to read this quickly. Curious around steps for AI adoption. There's a risk of feeling that adopting AI for reactive interactions that comes in. I assume that's whenever a customer interaction comes into the organization. If you deploy it for an incoming contact from a customer and it's not working brilliantly, you risk a number of things, putting users off, yada, yada. So curious on views on the AI impacts from a proactive space, service or marketing service example, maybe as simple as using AI to complement recurring activities like monthly billing. So I guess that proactive assistance is what the question is really asking, and any views or experiences on that. I don't know if Kevin, if you have come across that, or indeed Curtis.
I think from the kind of the marketer mindset, if you will, is that Alan, you're right. There's a lot of ways to capture these signals and data. Okay, AI will sort through it. Kind of some recordings. If anybody's ever recorded on a Zoom, there's this like little tool we use called Otter, and Otter will record the Zoom and it'll bring emphasis to words that are used over and over again. Okay, so then you take that and you've got the script, you've got the words, you can highlight that somebody has a problem or there's emphasis around a certain subject. I think the proactive nature is through mining that data, like you're talking about, Alan, to say, what are the meaningful things that we have to frame up into a proactive response?
What I was going to say, what I can add to that is, working with some of the large financial services groups who have multi-tiers of members or customers, they have different programs where there's hyper awareness that when a top tier customer comes in, if they look like they're struggling, they look like they're curious, they're there in any channel to be able to support them. Obviously, they're learning on anything they do in the AI and bots, but they do make a mistake that some of those lower customers that they've relegated to self-service, if the bot is not performing or it's dead ending and they're unable to complete, a lot of them are not doing what we would traditionally do in the old IVR days, which is 3 strikes and you get to talk to somebody, or you get escalated to an assisted chat agent or something of that sort. So I think everybody is working on that, but I mentioned a couple examples that recently I was trying to spend more money, but I was stuck because the bot didn't understand that there could be somebody that would go through self-service and then try to actually buy something significant. So I had to end up call. So just an example there.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
We have this term in our world, marketer plus machine, right? But it goes customer service plus machine, sales plus machine. I think what you're describing is where the interaction gets dropped. And all of a sudden you're talking to somebody and they don't know you were frustrated. They don't know that you were looking to buy something more. They don't know that I want to figure out, can I use my points for this problem? So I think tech has a big role in this, right? To make sure it's capturing it. But, the proactive nature is training your human beings to see where these, pearls live. Because it's not all tech. It is the human beings that we empower within the enterprise.
Yeah, and one other thing to add, I know we're running out of time, Oliver, but with Kevin's approach on personification, with other companies such as Affinity out there matching personalities, and some of these consumer database owners of records that understand spending behaviors and things of that, building your strategy to manage all this in a static nature always has to have a dynamic component where if you miss something in the persona with Kevin and you learn some new data points that you can react dynamically in real time. That's another thing that we're seeing a lot of people focus on.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us back almost full circle to that. It's not just about the contact center. It's not just about the acquisition piece. It's clearly about joining those all up. We are almost against time, but if one more question from mine, I'm going to throw in, and we might run a couple of moments over. So one come in here about, which is sort of adjunct, assuming to leverage a lot of this tech, you need to be in the cloud. What's the view of the move to the cloud, particularly in the enterprise space? Curtis, do you want to take a stab at that? And
So I'll take that one. So I have 4 or 5 different transformation conversations I'm working on, and everybody's either got a public cloud with AWS, GCP, or Azure. Everybody's got a contact center. Everybody's got a CRM play. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing them all rally around full service. So Microsoft's got a new contact center offer that's coming out. Of course, Amazon and Salesforce combined. But I think right now we're seeing a force for the premise customers to have to move to the cloud. Some are in a hybrid environment where they're keeping some of their data in their own lock and key and consuming compute from the cloud. But it is a change, and those know the news that's been out the last couple of weeks. There's lots of people looking for lots of directions. So I think Oliver can help you with that, because we are talking jointly to a bunch of customers that are all in the same boat. Like, what do we do next? We thought we were doing this, and now we think we're going to have to do this. So lots of discussions.
Perfect. Kevin, I'll let you interlude for one final time.
Well, I will say that, yes, we move to the cloud, but the cloud can move within the applications we're using. So cloud services serving up inside my device, my phone, whatever I'm using, is bringing the cloud inside. So it's a two-way street, right, Curtis? I need to have my enterprise move to the cloud, but if there's a cloud service out there, pipe it into what I'm using. And of course, that's all possible through APIs and SDKs today.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for the contributions. It's I know we could probably continue for another hour. Unfortunately, time doesn't permit that. But I guess as a wrap up, the 2 or 3 things I would certainly say that experience, I think Alan talked about, driven by the data, and I think that's key, albeit it shouldn't rule everything. The persona approach, Kevin, you've talked about, and certainly coupling that together with the inbound aspect of whenever a customer engages you, and then how do you refine that persona as you go over time will become more critical. I think those are certainly 2 key takeaways. What I'd like to say to our audience, by all means, and I know there's some questions we haven't answered, so we'll reach back out to you guys. By all means, reach out, and I know you'll get some email follow-up from our side, from Elaine. We are offering a 1-hour workshop with any or all of the team here. So if you have specific queries or you want to delve a little bit more into what you're doing at your side, please reach out. We'll organize that. We'll get the team back together and run through some of the problems or challenges you're facing, and I guess how we can maybe help guide you through that. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to Kevin, Alan, and Curtis. It's been a pleasure again talking to you. Thank you for your invaluable inputs, and thank you to everyone. Have a great day and see you soon.
Bye. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.